Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Business Spotlight. I am Scott McMeans with Action Coach SBL. Today, I'm here with John Wilson of the Wilson Companies. We're going to get a chance to learn what John has done over the last so many years of building a pretty juggernaut-like business in the HVAC space. So, John, I'm going to turn the microphone and the camera over to you. Tell the people who you are and introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. So I'm John Wilson, and I own and run Wilson Plumbing and Heating here in Northeast Ohio. Right now, we have about 140 team members. We do mid 20 millions of revenue, and we're the largest privately owned home service company in Northeast Ohio. So that's our claim to fame.
Wow.
Uh, our history is a long one. My grandfather Ralph started the business back in 1958, and he ran it for about 30 years. My dad bought it from him, ran it for about 30 years, and in 2016, I purchased it from my dad. At the time, we had 8 employees and about $1 million of revenue. So the past 8 years, my 8th year anniversary of ownership was yesterday. So over the past 8 years, we've created over 130 jobs for our community. We've contributed nearly 100 million to Northeast Ohio's GDP, and we're still accelerating our growth. So that's a lot of our story. So we're a residential home service company in plumbing, HVAC, and electric, and we're growing like a weed.
That's outstanding. I mean, very rarely do you get a chance to see, let alone hear about a company being this successful in 8 years. Clearly, you started off with a foundation, but
hmm
80 employees and less than $1 million or so that you said, and all of a sudden, 8 years later, I think you said 130 employees and close to
hmm
$26 million in sales. There's some substantial growth, significant growth. Walk me through what makes it so different. Why is it that the Wilson
Yeah.
companies have been able to do that? Because this is not an easy space, right? Interesting
Yeah.
behind you, there's the picture behind you that says, working towards a clog-free
hmm
nation, right? Everybody despises the fact that they have to use a plumber or an HVAC because
hmm
that means something in their house broke. So walk me through this. This is an interesting conversation because not too many companies get a chance to have such success, and I want you to share why you're so successful.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've grown quite a bit. Obviously about 26 times
Yeah.
in 8 years. So we it's not often talked about, but the trades went through um, a large upheaval about a decade ago. And we all see and feel the effects of it every day. But it's not really a public conversation of what happened to the competitors inside the industry from a decade ago to now. And the introduction that happened a decade ago was much more technology.
Mm.
So, similar to how taxis were disrupted with Uber, the trades went through their own disruption and it just took a lot longer. And the tech stack isn't as fun as Uber because it's all contractor facing tech. So I'm going to give a couple examples. Um, 10 years ago, when I was, first still cutting my teeth in the industry, the average home service contractor was probably 7 to 10 total people. We were the average home service contractor. So very small neighborhood service companies. And roughly about $2 million of revenue. So if you would look around at the landscape of competitors at that time, that's what you would see. You would see a tremendous amount of mom and pop shops. What's happened since is tech has entered the trades in a huge way. And, again, a decade ago, that was the average contractor. There were maybe only a few dozen companies in the entirety of the United States over $20 million of revenue, over 100 trucks. That was extremely uncommon because what it would take to do that is it was logistically a
Mm.
nightmare. You would need whiteboards and you would need, 10 people to file paper. Uh, it it was very difficult. Whereas now tech has made managing, I have 100 trucks on the road, and tech has made managing 100 trucks much different than it was a decade ago.
Hmm.
And it's also the introduction of digital marketing in the way that it exists now allowed someone like me, a relatively upstart, to overtake incumbents. So at the time, brand was this big moat. And how much were you spending on TV? It's sort of like car dealerships, right? Like whoever could spend the most won. But what happened in the mid 2010s is whoever could dominate the digital landscape won. So companies that had a significant presence and strangle on the market, I can name a few, they lost that power because they didn't pay as much attention to Google reviews,
Mm-hmm.
something that now we all just naturally lean into. But in 2016, Google reviews were still kind of new, and you could meaningfully compete with a company 10 times your size if you had better and more Google reviews. So, yeah, a decade ago was a big disruption in our space, and the companies that capitalized on it grew, and the ones that didn't. Uh, there's many companies that I remember competing against that no longer are in business. There's a few that I remember competing with that have stayed exactly the same because they've been very late adopters of
Yeah.
technology. So their company has just not moved. Um, there's a company in Akron that their shop was 4 or 5 minutes away from us, and they used to be big uh, to us, and they have almost the exact same amount of staff a decade later. It's honestly kind of amazing because just in that same decade, we've gone from 8 people to 140. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know how you can stand still. We don't get it. So that's really the big story here is we adopted early, we executed fast, and then we acquired as many people as we could that refused to do either of those.
Well, the interesting thing that you're bringing a comment here is you adopted early, you executed fast, and you built a team. That is business 101, at least business success that's going to grow
Mm-hmm.
101. What do you think is the biggest reason why the incumbents were so late to adopt?
It's money, it's investment, it's
Okay.
sophistication. Um, our, you know, software costs a lot of money. It's a big investment. It's a big energy suck. And a decade ago, it wasn't yet as clear cut as it is now that, oh, you just need this. There is really no good way to run on paper. Um, but a decade ago, that was still a conversation of like, oh, I've got my whiteboards. I'm okay. I'm doing fine. And yeah, costs money. It's coming directly
Yeah.
out of earnings. So if I'm going to look at the an old school, I'm going to use old school. I consider myself old school. I've been in trades my whole life, but if I'm going to consider like this uninvesting class of owner, uh, they have a few problems that are going to prevent them from investing in tech. So first off, they don't market, and marketing. Some people wear that as a badge of pride, but like really, it's obviously kind of dumb. Like if you don't market, then you're accepting whatever lead comes your way.
Hmm.
Marketing, almost by definition, is choosing who you want to work with. So if we think of marketing that way, like that's the purpose of it. Is hey, I want to work with homeowners. That's my target customer. I want to work with homeowners because they understand my value proposition. I can recruit and train people effectively to solve those exact pain points that homeowners have, and I can consistently knock their customer service out of the park. So those three things, I want to work with homeowners. So marketing is just me opting to choose homeowners over, you know, anybody else that calls me.
Hmm.
So one, they don't market. Now they don't market maybe because they don't understand that dynamic, or they don't market because they can't afford it. Why can't they afford it? Well, it's probably because we're not choosing our customer. And if you can't choose your customer, you can't set your price point. So if anyone's calling you and you're this sort of like your milk or your corn, you're an undifferentiated commodity, then price point is all that you have. Whereas I'm not an undifferentiated commodity. I'm not milk. I have much more than just a price point. I can solve the exact pain points that the exact customers that I want have. Um, so because they are this undifferentiated service provider, the neighborhood attorney, right? They're going to charge the lowest rates because they don't solve a specific pain point. They just happen to be there. They exist in the sphere of home service contractors. So because they're not charging enough and they're not marketing, they can't afford the reinvestment. So when I look at some of these service providers, that one that I referenced that hasn't grown in a decade somehow, uh, they're charging, if we think about the cost of living in the last 10 years, I think we can all acknowledge it has gone up quite a bit. Their
Unfortunately,
rates,
yes.
unfortunately, yes. And with that, labor, benefits, everything. Our insurance premium this year was like 50%. It was insane. Um, their rates have gone up 15% over the last decade. So they're undercharging the market. So now maybe that's good because they feel like they're busy and they're getting work and all that stuff because they're this, they're corn, they're undifferentiated. Someone's calling them and they're cheap. So maybe that's good, but then you can't invest in your tech, you get left behind. And now there's where you used to have a very distinct advantage in the market. You are a decade behind.
Yeah. It's a hard spot to come back from, right?
Yeah, they won't.
Well,
They
interesting.
gave it up.
Well, in a space such as HVAC, let's say, or plumbing, like what we've already talked about, this is a service that people need. They need it done
Yeah.
quickly, and if it's not done well, they're going to complain about it. So you might
Yeah.
as well get the right value proposition from the right customer or right company to come do the right
Mhm.
thing for you. And what I find
Right.
interesting about somebody who hasn't raised their prices more than 15% in a decade, I would assume most of their clients are getting them solely on price. And next time there's a price competitor coming in the door, they're going to go with that person anyway. And that person who is trying to sell on price is going to lose on price every time.
Yeah.
And not to mention, if you are always the lowest competitor, no one wants to buy from you because you don't have a perception that is quality or uniqueness to you.
Yeah.
And you
Well,
get
and you're also not
kicked
quality
out.
because in services, um, like who am I putting in your home?
Yeah.
Like that's a very real part of the equation here. I have to put someone qualified, capable, competent, but also, do they have a felony? Are they on drugs? Did they
Yeah.
drink their breakfast? Like this is a very real part of our industry. And the companies that are undercharging to market do not have people that I would want around my kids.
It's a very
So
solid point.
yeah, I mean, I'm good on that.
Well,
So, and it's
what's
because
the
they
old
can't afford
adage?
it. It's because they're still charging too cheap. So where do the best talent go? They come to me. They come where they're going to get paid the best, where they have the best benefits. And the only reason that you would work for a company like that is because you can't get into a company like mine.
That's a very good point as well. I think the argument for talent being attracted to you is a reflection of what you offer the market, right? So if you've got a really good
Yeah.
value proposition that you're offering the market, it's almost as
Hmm.
if you only attract people that are good enough to be in that stratosphere that you're pushing out to the marketplace. And
Right.
there's another thing that says you only hire the best people. That resonates with the home audience that wants that best person in their house because they don't want second class
Right.
technicians to show up. It's not worth their time. One
Yeah.
thing I think I'd love to hear your opinion on this because there's an interesting perspective when it comes to service and the service industry. You can have it good, you could have it fast, or you could have it
Hmm.
cheap. You can't
Yeah.
have all three. So what is it?
Yeah.
Pick two,
Hmm.
right? So which two are
Yeah. I
you
mean,
going to
we
pick?
we fully agree because that's almost how we present it too. So if I'm going to compare myself to like why would a homeowner work with me,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a good exercise that anyone should put yourself through is why would somebody pay me money? So if I take what I attempt to believe is an unbiased view of Wilson from a customer's perspective, If they Google us, we're super highly rated, like 4 or 5,000 total reviews across all of our Google My Businesses. So we are liked. People have had good experiences, relatively high rating, 4.8, 4.9. So like most of our experiences are good. Obviously, we're not perfect. So that's, a good signaling. Um, Once they get past that, they start to see, okay, they offer the breadth of service that I potentially need. They do what I want. So that maybe they fix furnaces or clean drains. They'll get my toilet working again. Whatever it is. It doesn't have to be complicated, but they offer that service that I'm now wanting, and they make it very obvious that they offer it by talking about it a lot on social media, emails, website, wherever. So okay, so they're liked. They generally do a good job, which is good.
Mhm.
They offer the thing that I want. And the next one is, are they available and can I afford them? And availability is actually kind of complicated. That's one of the most, if I think about the the thing that we are most religious about, it is our
Okay.
capacity plan. It's our capacity planning. We sell time. And that time gets extra complicated. If I was an attorney working at a desk, I can sell 10 hours a day relatively easily. You just, hit the clock. But we have to drive a lot. So that really adds some complication. So, how we think about capacity and dispatching and routing and who's doing what matters a lot. That really determines our success on a,
Mhm.
on a daily basis. And our availability to have the appropriate number of people for the appropriate amount of calls that come in every day is challenging when you receive 1,000 phone calls a day, like we do. So, juggling those two things, the supply and demand, like, do we have the supply of available technicians within a reasonable enough time frame to perform this job for the amount of calls that we have coming in? Like, how do we compare there? We get a tremendous amount of jobs because the neighborhood guy that they've used forever can't get there for a month, and we have
Wow.
capacity today. We can do it tomorrow. But there's a cost to that capacity, which is the price point. We cost
Sure.
more, but we have 100 trucks on the road. We can solve your urgent demand in under 24 hours. But there's a cost to having, to me as a business, there's a cost to me to having that available capacity sitting. So yeah, fast and good. Those are the things that we optimize around, because we know that we can get there fast because our whole business, up to including sewer replacements, which is a big job, we live and die by same day, next day work. So we can get there fast, but we have to be able to charge for our ability to get there fast because it costs a lot of money to be able to get there fast.
Yeah. And that's okay as long as people understand up front, this is the value proposition I'm buying into right now.
Yeah.
Right? If I wanted it done poorly in 2 months and
Mm-hmm.
have it done really cheap, by all means, that's the route I'm going to take. But if I'm going to go
Mm-hmm.
work with Wilson, as you just explained, I'm going to get it done in a timely fashion, and it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
done really well.
By
Why
the
would anybody
literal
not?
best, yeah, best plumbers, best HVAC techs in our market, because we have the best compensation and we have the best benefits. So we have the best talent and
Yeah.
we can get there the fastest. It's a compelling proposition when you have sewage coming out of your floor drain.
Yeah, I would think you
Like,
want the best guy that knows how to do that right away.
right,
And I
right.
think from a business education perspective, John, what you're really kind of expressing to people, and I appreciate you going down that pathway, is if you're looking to be a successful business, you can't build it around one thing and one thing only. You have to build it
Mm-hmm.
around what you're good at as a value proposition in order to attract clients and also order in order to attract talent to fulfill your vision and your mission for what you want as a business.
Yeah.
Very rarely do business owners understand the need for a solid team, because once you have a good team, the team takes care of the customers take care of the business, and what's the
Mm-hmm.
business do for the owner? It takes care of him as well. So there's a really unique relationship between a business owner and his team, and the team relationship to the customer. I think that's a very pivotal point that most business owners, especially those that are just starting out, don't grab right away because they
Hmm.
try to be everything to everybody as a business owner. You need to have a built-in team that you trust well enough to take care of things so you don't have to be there all the time as a business owner, right?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think, when we're talking about self sort of selecting what we're optimizing around, the only way you can get there is by working backwards, like we talked about earlier
Mhm.
with marketing of who am I going to work for? Because if I'm going to work for whoever rings my phone, I won't have as clear of an understanding of what their pain points are. If it's Sally and her home, I know that she wants fast. She wants us there today because she doesn't have heat, and she wants us to solve that problem well. But if I'm working for, landlords, they care a lot less about time and they care much more about price.
Yeah.
So we're not going to be a great fit there. So it's the self-selecting of who is my target, and then building your business around serving that target, and then building your marketing around providing you more of those targets is really how you
Mhm.
scale. But you can't solve any of those none of them are siloed. It's all the same decision.
This is a masterclass, honestly, John, in marketing, whether it's internal marketing to get the right teammates or external marketing. And what you just said is something we preach all the time is once you select your target market and you build a
Mm-hmm.
copy or an advertisement, a message that makes sense to them, and you give them an offer they can't refuse, who in the world would not do business with you? But
Right.
not everybody's your target audience. So don't worry about anybody that fits outside that bullseye, right?
Right.
And that's a big piece of I think a lot of businesses struggle with when they get out the gate because they're trying to just chase the money. I know it's hard
Yeah.
to or hard to stop chasing money, but I think what businesses need to pay attention to is if we're going to be this when we grow up, we might as well start out young and do it the right way.
Yeah. Like what I'll see. So in my industry, we have slow periods, right? So let April. I'll pick on HVAC because HVAC is the most known for it because it's weather enhanced.
Yeah.
So if it's hot, if it's cold, they have more work. If it's mild, they don't. So what ends up happening, which is kind of interesting, is there's two different ways people can go, and everyone seems to go the wrong one.
Hmm.
So there's two ways you can go here. You can solve the core issue, which is the core issue is I have to do better at keeping my team busy during downtime. That's the core issue. Like that's it.
Yeah.
The way they attempt to solve it is I'm going to try to be all things to everybody. I'm going to take more leads in this thing that I don't really want, and I'll get out of it once we're out of slow season. So like I'm going to go do some new construction, or I'm going to go work on some contractor jobs, or I'm going to take on commercial work,
They
and
start
not
changing
under.
their identity, right?
They changed their identity, they
Yeah.
changed their staffing, they changed their business, and all of the mental bandwidth that it takes to go launch that new thing that they don't think is a big deal could have just gone towards actually solving the problem, because seasonality is a solvable problem. Like you don't need, Mother Earth to solve that issue for you. You can solve it. Uh, but most people's attempt to solve it is by launching a new business unit that they don't even think is a new business unit. And then a year and a half later, they wake up and realize that this, thing that they never wanted is now a large portion of their business and they don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah. Interesting. How do you solve the seasonality piece?
It's back to living and dying by capacity. So if we acknowledge uh, who our target customer is, and we know what their pain points are, and we know what our available capacity is to fill, then it's just finding the tools to fill it.
Got it.
So a tool could be, yes, I'm going to go launch new construction. I think that's a terrible tool, but it is a tool. Others would be, how do we show up in the market? Where are our customers at? How do we market in a different way? How do we call our customers and set up appointments during slow season? How do we set up promotions? How do we do something that still aligns with our core everyday focus and the talent that we have on staff and fill up that daily capacity? Like
Okay.
that's the game.
Yeah. And I'm glad you answered it the way you did because what you said is we're not going to change who we are. We're just going to change what message or the way we message, but we still have the
Mhm.
same technicians. We still have the same infrastructure. So we can't
Yeah.
change our spots. We're just going to talk to a different group of people. That is the most important lesson I think anybody can learn out of this is do not change who you are. Just change the people you're talking to. Maybe you'll get something out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as they still align with the core customer, then yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the old adage of how many people did you talk to? How good are you at convincing them
Mhm.
to buy from you? And then how often do they buy? What do they
Yeah.
buy when they, or how much do they buy when they buy from you? And how good are you at managing your cost? That's how a
Yeah.
business is run. It's as
Yeah.
straightforward as that. This has been an amazing conversation. I have something for you I want to ask. What advice do you have for a brand new entrepreneur or business owner? Doesn't have to be in your space, just in general. What advice would you give a brand new business owner?
Uh, Quick advice is action beats inaction. Um, we have done a lot over the last 8, 9 years of my life. And really, we've packed decades of growth into 1 decade. Uh,
Yeah,
and a lot of it, we didn't have all the facts before we did something. So we've bought nearly 9 companies. I dropped out of college 3 times. I'm not especially smart. Before we built this thing, I was a plumber, hands on the tools. And somehow I figured out how to buy 9 companies and build a mid 20 million something or other. I don't think it's because I'm brilliant. I think it's because I did something. I think I woke
yeah,
up and I did something. So I would say action beats inaction. If you're spending a month figuring out your logo, you're already doing it wrong. You need someone to pay you money, and you need to go get us. You need to go do something. And if you're sitting there like I don't know what to do, there's always something to do. So if you're a plumber and hey, I can't get my phone to ring because John's marketing is so much better, you can still meaningfully compete. You can go knock on doors. You can call your friends. You can uh, go to your church and do a program on how to keep your pipes from freezing in the winter. Like those are things that I can't do because we're just frankly too large to be able
yeah.
to do that on such a micro scale. So there is always something to do. Uh, and I think that's probably the big one. There's always something to do, and action will always beat inaction.
I think those are great lessons. When you're a new business owner, there's always something to do because your business needs so much attention. But making sure you take the right action is the most important thing you can do. Pay attention to what you're
Yeah.
doing. As
Will
long
it
as it
drive
aligns
revenue?
with your right, aligns with your core values, generates revenue, everything else is inconsequential until it needs to be taken care of. John, this has been a great conversation. I can't believe it's already been a half an hour and we're closing in on this. Um, Anybody who's interested in connecting with Wilson, by all means, their information will be down below so you can connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
Click the links, click the LinkedIn profile, anything you need to know, by all means, will be there. John, this has been a great experience. I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on. I hope it helps
My
somebody.
pleasure.